I love you.
I love you too. American Horror Story is psychological horror.
Mommy.
There's something there, and it's alluring, but it's also scary.
Every episode, we're going to be discovering something new about these characters.
You don't know what's going on. It's scary, it's spooky, it'll mess with your head.
She's still moving.
It's fearless. It really, really goes to the jugular.
People are scared of it. People are terrified to watch it.
Wake up!
The story is really about these characters, and they're faced with their greatest fears.
I had a really great time, too.
It's definitely a thriller. It's definitely a horror, but it's also really, really cerebral.
I'm a pretty girl.
There are forces at work here that might not be readily recognizable.
The babies are coming!
But they are symbolic of the forces at work in this world now.
You're gonna regret it. You're gonna regret it.
In action!
It's a classic LA Victorian, built around 1920 by the doctor to the stars at the time.
Ryan and I, we both love horror movies, and the idea of doing horror on TV and the darkness of it was sort of really exciting to us. Whenever we do anything like this, Ryan sort of has a lot of really big ideas, like The Rubber Man, The House, Infidelity. And we just started talking, and in just a matter of a couple weeks, I think, we wrote the pilot.
Excuse me. You are going to die in there.
When I first read the pilot, I was so excited because I thought this is fresh and this is new and this is exciting. I was really, really looking forward to how Ryan Murphy was going to build out this fantasy world that he had created.
Why are you in my house?
I read all the scripts prior to starting to shoot the show. What was interesting, it wasn't just the horror or the supernatural element. There was also a tremendous emotional undercurrent I think every single person can relate to outside of the horror element.
Hey, this is my husband, Ben. I certainly thought it was an incredibly interesting, very unusual story, and it would be pretty cool to be a part of.
Please, you have to get out of there. That place is evil. I read it and I was like, whoa, whoa. You know, it's really out there in a really brave, challenging, cool way.
FX was really excited about the idea of the horror show, and I think that they saw that there was an area that hadn't been really explored on TV, and it's a very popular area. There was never a moment where we got any doubt from like, do you think you can do horror on TV? It was always very much like, yes, TV needs horror, and FX is just the place for it.
I love it.
Great. That's for the Addams family now.
Ultimately, I think that it's an American story, certainly, of a family that's torn apart.
We meet Vivian and her family at a crisis point. She has recently had a miscarriage and was a really brutal, brutal experience. On top of that, she walks in on her husband having an affair.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No.
It's really a double whammy.
I guess these guys were into the kinky stuff, huh? So that's right, huh?
It's not funny.
I think it looked good in it.
Holy shit.
Ben and Violet and Vivian are our heroes of the show. I think they are the ones struggling to do good in a difficult world, and I just think it's a struggle. I think they are really all good people. I mean, you look at Ben and you say, well, how could he be a good person? He does such awful things to his family. But I think he is a good person who just really, like everybody, struggles.
How long are you gonna punish me for?
I'm not punishing you, you narcissistic asshole.
Ben is an interesting guy because he's a psychiatrist himself, but I think that he probably needs more therapy than anybody else in the house. He's really, really struggling and fighting. He's trying to overcome the psychological demons that are inside of him.
Let me tell you who's dangerous. That would be me. You really want to keep going with this story, Larry? Because I'm right at the edge!
Ben certainly is in such turmoil within himself about who he is and who his family is to him and his wife is to him.
I think he loves his wife enormously. I think he's trying to stay in this marriage. I think he's trying to be that guy that maybe his father was for him.
I'm not leaving this house. And I'm not giving up on this family.
Ben could easily be terribly unlikable. And so you need to cast somebody who, even when they went into the darkness, you still had an affection for. And I think Dylan has that. He has the ability to really be very, very dark without being unlikable.
This is a great role for Dylan. Of course, my character is dealing with some serious issues with him. It must be so great to be able to do that, to just flick a switch and be able to justify your own bad behavior.
My family comes first.
Since when?
In any relationship, once the trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to fix it. And the trust is broken, and we're trying. There's this deep, deep connection we have with each other, and I'm not sure that we could survive without each other. And I think that we're kind of walking that line of enormous love and enormous hurt. And sometimes, you know, with love comes hurt.
Don't make me feel like I'm crazy. What's interesting to me about Vivian is that I do see her as a very strong character. I see her as a woman who has had real control over her life.
We're selling this house.
Suddenly, that isn't working anymore.
My mind is playing tricks on me, Moira.
I think that even if you haven't gone through the sort of serious issues that her family, that Vivian's family is going through, just the idea of things in your life not happening exactly as you imagine that they would or think that they should, and confronting that in yourself. For me, it's fun to play.
You have no idea how long I've been wanting to do that.
I think for an audience, especially in a show like this that's going to challenge what they can handle, you want somebody in there that they feel like, okay, I can totally believe in this person, I can be with this person.
You just always surprise me. I like that. As soon as I met with Connie, I knew that we had this instant rapport with each other. I think that carries over certainly to the show. We have to trust each other completely because our scenes are somewhat sexual in nature, and we have to touch each other and kiss each other and be intimate, and, you know, all these things that are difficult in life, never mind, you know, on screen.
He looks just like you. Especially his hair.
Instantly we fell into this trust with each other and belief, you know, that we are these people.
Full disclosure requires that I tell you about what happened to them.
Oh, God. They didn't die in here or anything, did they?
Yes, actually, both of them.
Where did it happen?
The basement.
We'll take it. Violet's a really strong character. She's a fun character to play, but she has her issues. She has a lot of disappointments in life, and she's trying to deal with that her ways. I thought you hated each other. Well, at least you hated him. I don't blame you. He was a shithead.
I think that Violet is very smart, and I think that she sees things. Our relationship, again, is complex, too, because she's aware of this affair that I had.
I'm saying Mom's crazy, and it's your fault. You drove her crazy.
What's interesting about Violet is that she's not really scared of anything. And the thing that's interesting is that she's able to actually maneuver between the worlds of the ghost world and the real world.
Don't you dare me, Violet!
I had no idea that I was going to die. These things start happening, but it's not confirmed or denied for so long. But I thought she was dead. But nobody told me I had to read the script. I had to wait until I got it. And when I found it, I screamed. I was like, I knew it. I was so happy to find out. I called it.
If you love someone, you should never hurt them. Never.
Right? I know. She meets him, and there's a connection. I mean, she doesn't trust anybody. I mean, especially her parents. And then Tate comes along, and he starts to sympathize with her, and he understands, and he listens to her, and that's a big thing.
It's fine now. I'm here. Some of them beg for their life. I don't feel sad. I don't feel anything. It's a filthy world we live in.
Can I help you?
It's a filthy, goddamn helpless world.
He's a total psychopath. So, it comes from no remorse, no empathy, no compassion. But he does love Violet, so...
Do you believe in ghosts?
Why are you asking me? Tate's dark. Violet's attracted to the darkness. You know, she says she's not scared of anything, but... you know she is.
Tate always has a reason to kill people. I mean, he's always trying to either protect Violet or be with Violet.
I used to think you were like me. You were attracted to the darkness. But Tate, you are the darkness.
Tate's someone I think who grew up in a place that was a struggle, but he was predisposed for the darkness and for the evil. He got a lot of help from his mom.
I have to say that I always adored Jessica Lange. She's creating this character that's just so compelling.
That girl is a monster. I love her, and I'm a good Christian, but Jesus H. Christ. I think Constance is an unorthodox character in the sense that she doesn't fit these kind of ideas of what a good mother is. Look at yourself. I think she's a throwback to another time where people weren't all that concerned about, is this the correct way in the eyes of society at this moment?
I think there isn't a closed door in the world that beauty can't open.
She already lost everything that's important to her, including her sense of morality and her values and everyone she's ever cared about.
Most people would be broken by the deaths of their children, but my nature would not permit such weakness.
She just has great regret, and it drives her to do, certainly somewhat unspeakable things.
I was and continue to be a hell of a shot.
The house is evil, now you want to buy it.
That's goddamn right. I need that house.
The star of the show is the house. That's what it's all about. This house and what happens in that house and what it does to people.
There's some evil, there's some darkness present in the house, and you walk in and you can feel it.
What's in this basement? I want the truth.
What I'm about to tell you might scare you to death.
I can take it.
The house is a character, and then it's surrounded by all of these other characters that are impacted by the house or making an impact on the house in some way.
The force here in this house is larger than the many individual traumas. That's very interesting. But what do we do about the gays? How do we get rid of them? The house has a tremendous presence. It's housing many, 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 many secrets.
It has layers and layers of history and life and death in it, and everybody who steps into this house and becomes involved is bound to it forever, for good or for bad.
I think all the great horror movies, they have iconic imagery, and the house really has that iconic quality to it.
Our tour concludes with one of the most famous houses of horrors in the City of Angels, better known as the Murder House.
The exterior of the house is a location house down in mid-city area of LA. It's kind of a wonderful house, finished in 1907. It's an odd place. It was essentially a nunnery or a convent for a while, which I think is always interesting because you get this idea of sacred and profane in one place.
I love the original house. When I walked up to that house, I was like, wow, can I live here?
Ryan Murphy, our director, was very clear about wanting a house that had enormous character. We scouted, and as soon as Ryan came into this house, he immediately felt that it was the vibe that was right for him and was right for the story.
When we went to bring the sets home to the stages here at Paramount, you have to now translate that into physical terms that can be shot easily, and walls have to move so you can get in and out with cameras and that sort of thing.
And action, slow reverse.
The basement is the epicenter, I think, of whatever evil spirit or force is in the house. The original house did have this basement, but it was a little flat. So when we came back to the stage, we added a lot of windows and some nooks and crannies that give it a lot more sort of depth, almost sort of a catacomb feel or a crypt feel. Pretty much all of the interiors are here on stage. Ryan refers to it, I think, as house porn, what we do in the Harmon house to make it sort of cool, sexy, attractive.
It's nice, right? Definitely lamps and everything. There's even an office so I can see patients at home. It's perfect.
When I first got hired by Ryan, one thing he said to me was, it's Prada, not Versace. It was going to be a really clean, simple, kind of modern sensibility rather than very elaborate, and it wasn't highly fanciful or any of that. It's more about very iconic, interesting, shaped pieces and a lot of space around them. In fact, so much so that it was challenging because there was so little in the sets. He wanted it so minimal. It didn't tell hardly anything in a weird way, which is actually what he wanted.
You think I came all the way here from Philadelphia for this life, this house?
I built you this house exactly the way you wanted it.
You need to know the house's backstory, the same way you'd want to know what made any character what they are.
The flashbacks and the way those are edited together are really what help convey the character of the house. As you see a continuity of the occurrences and what happens to the different people that have been in the house, it becomes less random and more clear that there's some power at work.
Charles!
For God's sake, I'm looking!
The thing is that time doesn't exist for ghosts, and so when something happens in the 1920s or 1930s to a living character and then they die, that story is still being told by that ghost in present day, as far as they're concerned, because that's their life.
Dr. Harmon?
Excuse me, do we have an appointment?
I was told there was a doctor here who might help me.
Because the show jumped back and forth between periods of time, we wanted to make sure that audiences could really definitively and concisely know what time period they were in. So we had built almost like a roadmap of the visuals for each period of time and what it would entail and how we would approach it.
I've bisected her body, removed the intestines, and drained her blood. Why? I think you will find these pieces more portable.
Anytime when you can do contemporary and then combining other periods is very rewarding. For a costume designer, it has an enormous amount of design possibilities. When we start with a character like this, especially because it's based on somebody in real life, and when I was doing the fitting with Mina, we kept saying if things were too beautiful, it was like, oh, we've lost the dime store quality about this girl because she hasn't made it yet as a movie star. So we tried to find things that were interesting and beautiful, but still felt cheap.
I don't know how else to pay you. I know you're the one who can help me. I can tell.
You really have to have a strong foundation in costume history because we have to do it so quickly, especially when you only have moments on camera to try and show somebody from 1927 or 68. All those time periods, you've got to, as soon as that character walks on screen, subliminally the audience should know, oh, that's the 20s, that's the 30s, that's the 40s.
No, Thaddeus, go away!
And playing with time, we all thought was a vital way to tell a ghost story. Also, it sort of, allowed us to show some great horror.
Scream, Connie, will you? One more. And cut. Got it. Take that. That's great.
With a new show, you're always sort of trying to find what is the show. We know what it is on the page, and we know what it is that Ryan wants, but you have 1,000 different voices adding to that story as you shoot it.
Action, Brennan.
We have great directors who are really creative visually, and what we like to do is bring people like that in and make sure they understand the tone, but give them the freedom to sort of play.
Every director who worked on the show brought a unique approach to the story that they were telling. Every single one of them brought elements to the show that became the style of American Horror Story.
And cut. Great.
Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk definitely set a unique tone on this show. It was a tone that was established early on. They encouraged me to take it and go farther and to really run with it. The first idea that you come up with to light a scene is going to be the most generic. So I always try to reach for the second idea, and the second idea is always harder to find because it's in the back of your head. But it's going to be inherently the more interesting one to watch, and that's how we approached every scene in the show.
The hood's fully detachable. The harness has anchor points for bondage.
Forgive me, I don't get any of this at all.
The point of the suit's to dehumanize a submissive.
This whole piece for us was very much about sex and sexuality. It's very much talking about the dangers of giving in to your basic instincts and your basic needs.
Well, I can be kinky. Even the rubber man is so eerie. And there is, even when we shot it, there was some question about who's really inhabiting the rubber man, I think the idea of it is very sort of erotic. Faceless sex object. I mean, that can only be purely carnal. There's no emotion driving that. And I don't know, it's kind of hot.
Oh, it's weird. It's really, wow. Pretty weird. Kind of sexy too, because it's form-fitting, but weird.
What happened to their sex scene? Rubberman and Moira. Where did that go? I gotta get on the phone with Ryan.
So everything is very script-driven. There wasn't an agenda of visual effects. The story was going to kind of pull us all along.
Fuse Effects always understood that less is more, and that we didn't need to have 1,000 effects to make it work. We just needed to have a handful of effects that worked really, really well, and that really aided the storytelling.
We didn't want to add a lot of things that would take away from the scene. It wasn't going to be a scene about visual effects. It wasn't going to be a scene about fire and blood. It's a scene about characters, and it's a scene about intensity and pain and guilt and fear, and that was going to drive the scene.
3, 2, 1, go!
The Blood in the Stairs shot was a little bit of an homage to The Shining, and I thought it came out great. Sometimes, you have the best of intentions, and if it just doesn't match the story, the shot looking great isn't a good enough reason for it to play. And maybe we'll recreate that for next season, because it was a nice little thing. I kind of like to do it.
We've been working with Ryan for a couple of years now, doing all his visual effects for him. Ryan does have a very specific vision, but he's collaborative and open to ideas, and basically where we can clearly contribute something that they can't capture in camera, he's totally interested in it and open to it.
We found that our role ended up being, we want to help tell the story, but we want to kind of make sure that we stay in the background and we let the story come through on its own.
You're wide awake.
The visual effects department and special effects makeup work very tightly together in many cases on a show like this.
When I first read the script, Ryan said, come to my office and read it. I don't want it going out. So I'm busily writing down every little area of what our responsibilities were going to be, and it was quite large. But I was up for the challenge. I was excited to read something that Ryan was inspired by. He was throwing out all these wonderful horror story references that, of course, I am a big fan of horror films, so I knew exactly what he was talking about, exactly what he wanted.
Look what I got from Tinsley Studio today.
I'm not going to be able to do that.
I mean, whatever you want to do.
Moira is going to remove this part and spit it on the ground.
American Horror Story gave us the opportunity to do something that was so extravagant for characters that meant so much to the script. Visually, it's unpleasant and disturbing.
Come closer so I can get a good look at you. Ugh.
When I read it, I remember seeing that the character has burns over a lot of his body and is horribly disfigured, and so I figured that meant prosthetic makeup. But I actually enjoy it. I'm fascinated by the process. I'm fascinated by the craft of it. I get my mani-pedi later. It's great. It does begin to affect you. It begins to inform you. You begin to take on a strange characteristic because of it. And it's like any good costume. You put it on, it helps you transform. And I think this is really helping me transform. I love it.
I would say that it's an exploration of fear and loss. That it is about the choices we make that lure us into bad decisions and dark places versus the choices we make that keep us strong and keep us safe.
In a great horror story, people are going to die. It happens. And I think the key is to really care about the people that die.
Who you calling a pig?
People need to see what is going to happen next after just getting an event right in the face.
You want to know what happens next. Even the actors and the audience, that's one thing they have in common. They always want to know what happens next.
Go away, Tate!
You're all I want!
I mean, that's how Ryan's shooting it. And he goes, that's the most messed up, or like, that's the scariest.
Could you maybe not look at me?
It's the good stuff. It's the good stuff.
Naughty boy.
Everything about the show is really well done. How could you not watch it?
Well, that's all very touching. But where the hell's the baby? There are images that become almost iconic in that they remain with you for a long time. Now, what am I going to do with you?
Ryan is a visionary, and it's been amazing working with him because I literally find myself just sort of saying, okay, you just share with me what your vision is, and then let me do that.
We've tapped into his psyche and his writing and his creation, and I think we're all kind of occupying that world.
Take every great tradition of American horror and put them all together in a big ball. Boom.
This is what it does to you. This house.
Run.